There is a kind of exhaustion you can't really explain to anyone. From the outside, your life does look especially heavy, not chaotic, not to the point of breaking down. And yet, every morning when you open your eyes, there's already a vague sense of depletion inside you, as if you've just come through a long night without ever truly resting. You sleep times even more than enough, but this tiredness does live in the body. It sits somewhere deeper, behind the eyes, in the chest, in that feeling of having to start a new day when something inside you never truly stopped from yesterday. There are days when you don't overwork yourself, don't push too hard, don't compete with anyone, and yet by evening you still feel hollow, as if your energy has been drained by something invisible. Nameless, shapeless, leaving no clear trace behind. You begin to wonder whether you've grown weaker, lazier, or simply lost the motivation you once had. And that very question quietly exhausts you even more, because it turns the blade inward, against yourself, when you haven't actually done anything wrong. The strange thing is, this kind of tiredness doesn't disappear with rest. It doesn't fade after a free day. It isn't healed by a trip, because every time you sit down, your mind stands up. Every time your body stops, your thoughts start running. You may be eating, but your mind is already at tomorrow's work. You may be lying down, but your thoughts are reviewing what you said, what you did, what you missed. You may be resting, yet inside there's still a whisper telling you that you're not enough, not done, not allowed to stop. And so you live in a very peculiar state. Your body is here, but your mind is always ahead, always behind, always somewhere else, making even the smallest action carry an unnecessary weight. The ancient Japanese had a very short saying, but if you truly understand it, it's enough to quiet an entire lifetime. When the mind leaves the body, exhaustion begins. Not because you do too much, but because you are never fully present in what you're doing. You're not tired because life is hard. You're tired because you're living two lives at the same time, one that's happening right now, and another inside your head, where you're constantly predicting, worrying, judging, and preparing for things that haven't even happened. And perhaps before asking how to feel less tired, what matters more is to pause for a moment and ask yourself very softly, so no one else can hear. Right now, as you're listening to these words, where is your mind? Part Note, American English translation. There is a kind of exhaustion that is hard to name, because from the outside your life does look overwhelming. Nothing seems broken. There is no major crisis or visible pressure, and yet inside there is a dull, persistent sense of depletion, as if you are carrying an invisible weight with you throughout the day. You sleep enough, sometimes even more than before, but when morning comes you don't feel restored. Your body doesn't ache. Your head isn't dizzy. Yet there is a strange heaviness in your chest that makes the simple act of starting a new day require more effort than it should. There are days when you don't push yourself, don't overwork, don't fight through responsibilities or confront anyone. Your schedule isn't crowded, and still by nightfall you feel empty, as if your energy has been quietly drained by something you cannot see or touch, but never escapes. This exhaustion doesn't arrive suddenly or knock you down. It comes slowly, steadily, and lingers long enough that you begin to accept it, until you start believing that this is just what living feels like, that growing up means being tired, heavy, and constantly carrying this unnamed weight. You begin to wonder whether you've become weaker, less disciplined, or less motivated, and those questions themselves make even more tired, because they turn your attention inward in blame, even though you haven't actually done anything wrong. What makes this state especially frustrating is that it doesn't disappear with rest. It doesn't dissolve after a free day, and it isn't healed by a short escape or a trip away, because the moment your body stops, your mind keeps running. You may be sitting still, but your mind is not. It scans, revisits, prepares, anticipates, and it does all of this so quietly that you don't realize you are still working even while resting. And so you live in a strange condition where your body is in one place and your mind is somewhere else, and even the smallest actions become heavier, because they must carry the tension of a mind that refuses to stay with what is happening. In old Japan, there was a simple way to describe this state. When the mind leaves the body, exhaustion begins, not because you are doing too much, but because you are no longer inside what you are doing. And perhaps before searching for an answer to how to feel less tired, what matters more is allowing yourself to pause for a moment, not to fix or improve anything, but simply to ask, very quietly, right now as you hear these words, where is your mind? Part High, American English translation. Most of us grow up with a very simple understanding of exhaustion. We believe we are tired because we do too much, rest too little, or fail to balance our lives properly. And if we feel worn down, the obvious solution is to sleep more, rest more, or reduce our workload. That understanding sounds reasonable, and in some cases it is true. But there is another kind of fatigue, quieter, more persistent, and far more confusing, that often remains even after you have done everything you were supposed to do. You may take weekends off, make time for yourself, or simplify your schedule, and yet the heaviness inside remains. It is not dramatic or overwhelming. It simply follows you from morning to night, like a thin fog over everything you experience. And what unsettles you most is this question: if it is not because you are doing too much, then why are you still tired? This is where the misunderstanding begins. We are used to seeing exhaustion only through the lens of physical action, forgetting that human beings do not expend energy only when they work, but also when they think, worry, anticipate, evaluate, and constantly monitor themselves. There are days when your body does very little, yet your mind is endlessly active, and it is this mental activity that quietly drains your energy the most. You do not simply do your work, you think about whether you are doing it well enough. You do not just complete a task, you wonder whether it will produce results, satisfy others, or affect your future. You do not live only in the day you are in, you also live in days that have not arrived yet, through imagination, anxiety, and scenarios that have never actually happened. What makes this especially difficult is that you do all of this unconsciously. You do not sit down and decide, now I will worry. Your mind does it automatically, as a habit shaped over many years. It believes that by staying ahead, preparing in advance, and maintaining control, it is protecting you. But the cost of that constant protection is a baseline state of tension that never fully turns off. We often give this state respectable names: responsibility, ambition, thoughtfulness, foresight. And because those labels sound positive, we rarely question them. We assume that if we stop thinking this way, we will become careless, irresponsible, or fall behind. So we continue carrying a mind that is always tightly wounded, even when there is nothing we truly need to defend against. At this point, exhaustion is no longer a reaction of the body to labor, but a response of the entire system to a prolonged way of living in alertness. You are never allowed to be fully inside what you are doing, because a part of you is always standing outside, observing, judging, and preparing for what comes next. You are living your life while simultaneously guarding it. This is why many people feel most exhausted not when they are working, but when they are resting. While working, the mind has something concrete to attach itself to. But when the body stops, all the suppressed thoughts rise to the surface. Instead of resting, you are forced to face an endless stream of mental activity, and rest itself becomes effort. The greatest misunderstanding here is believing that you are tired because you are not strong enough, when in reality, you are tired because you have been bracing yourself for too long. You think you need more motivation, more discipline, more effort, when what your body and mind may truly need is something entirely different. The permission to stay fully in the present moment, without carrying the weight of the past and the future at the same time. There is a subtle but important detail that is often overlooked. When you are fully present in a task, even a small one, energy does not leak away. But when you act while simultaneously thinking about outcomes, judging yourself, and managing impressions, energy begins to drain. Not because the task is heavy, but because you are splitting yourself into pieces. And because this splitting happens continuously, day after day, you become accustomed to feeling tired without knowing its source. You fix things at the surface, but never touch the root. You rest but never truly stop. You live, but you are rarely fully there. Recognizing this is not about blaming yourself. It is about understanding that you may not need to change your life as much as you think. What may need reconsideration is not how much you do, but where you are while you are doing it. From this gentle recognition, another possibility begins to open. Not a life of doing less or more, but a life of being less divided. And from here, a new question naturally arises, no longer filled with self-judgment, but with quiet curiosity. If your exhaustion does not come from what you do, but from how present you are while doing it, what might happen if you begin placing your mind back where it belongs? Part B. When the mind works harder than the body. Takeshi once said that modern people are not exhausted because of labor, but because their minds are never allowed to rest, even when their bodies have already stopped. According to him, most energy is not consumed by what you do, but by what you continuously prepare for in your mind, even though it never actually happens. The mind by nature is not an enemy. It exists to recognize danger, to learn from the past, and to anticipate the future in moderation. But when it is trained in the wrong way, it becomes a machine of constant vigilance, always tightened like a stretched wire, ready to react to every possibility, even when no real threat is present. Takeshi called this state the guarding mind, a mind that always stands outside the moment, watching, judging and preparing, like a soldier who is never allowed to remove his armor, even long after the battlefield has emptied. And it is precisely this inability to ever take off the armor that slowly drains a person, bit by bit, quietly, without collapse, without noise. You can see this clearly in everyday life. You are working, but your mind is already thinking about the next task. You are speaking, but part of your mind is asking whether you are saying the right thing. You are resting, yet a voice inside reminds you that you are not done, not enough, not allowed to fully relax. And so no moment is ever complete. According to Takeshi, the human body is remarkably resilient as long as it knows when to tense and when to release. But the guarding mind does not understand this distinction. It cannot tell the difference between real danger and imagined danger. To it, every scenario must be prepared for, every mistake must be prevented in advance. The problem is that every time you prepare for something that has not happened, your body reeks as if it were happening right now. Your heart beats faster, your muscles tighten, your breath becomes shallow, and even though you may be sitting still, your entire system is in a state of readiness for battle. How could you not feel exhausted? Takeshi observed his students closely. Some trained less but were always drained. Others trained more yet still had energy. The difference was not time or intensity, but presence. Those who trained well, thinking about outcomes, about how they were being seen, about winning or losing, became tired much faster. He once said something that sounds simple but is deeply precise. One action with two minds makes the action twice as heavy. When your body is doing something but your mind is elsewhere, you split yourself in two, and that split is the source of energy loss. What makes this so subtle is that we often mistake this state for responsibility. We believe that if we do not think ahead, worry, or constantly monitor ourselves, we will become careless or fail. But Takeshi saw it differently. He said there is a very thin line between responsibility and fear, and most people unconsciously live on the side of fear, then give it a more acceptable name. The guarding mind causes you to live ahead of the present moment. You have not reached tomorrow, yet you are already carrying its weight. You have not faced failure, yet you are already living inside its emotional impact. And each time you do this, energy is pulled from the present to feed an imagined future. According to Takeshi, prolonged exhaustion is not a sign of weakness, but a sign that you are living too far from this moment. Your body is here, but your mind has traveled far away, and the distance between them is exactly where energy leaks out. He did not ask his students to stop thinking because that is impossible. He asked for something much more modest, to notice when the mind is working on behalf of the body, and when it is working unnecessarily. Simply noticing, without fixing, was already a major shift. Because the moment you see how much you are carrying in your mind, you regain a small but real choice. To return to the body, to breath, to the action that is happening. Not to escape, not to improve, but to stop the leakage. And from that recognition, a new possibility slowly emerges. Not a life of doing less or more, but a life of being less divided, fewer battles in the mind, fewer burdens that do not belong to the present. Takeshi said that when the mind stops guarding, the body knows how to recover on its own, not instantly, not through dramatic transformation, but through small, quiet changes, enough to ensure that you no longer feel tired in the same way again. Part born when rest no longer works. There is a paradox that many people are quietly living with. The more they rest, the more tired they feel, not in a dramatic collapsing way, but a dull, floating heaviness, as if the body has stopped but the mind is still running somewhere far away. You take time for yourself, turn things off, step away from work, lie still, yet instead of feeling lighter, your mind fills with thoughts you had no space to face during the day, and rest becomes just another place where the mind continues to work. Many people confuse stopping the body with truly resting, even though the two are very different, because if the body stops but the mind does not, energy continues to drain, only in a more subtle form. When you rest while thinking about what you have not finished, when you lie down while wondering if you are wasting time, when you allow the body to relax but not the mind, that rest does not restore you. It simply changes the shape of tension. Takeshi once said that rest is not an action but a state. And if the inner state does not change, even the quietest room can become a battlefield in the mind. This is why some people can work continuously and still retain energy, while others rest often yet remain exhausted. The difference is the first know how to be fully present in what they are doing, while the second never truly leave their thoughts behind. When rest stops working, our instinct is to search for more methods, longer breaks, farther escapes, greater distance from life itself. But if the mind continues to carry the same old burdens, every form of rest becomes temporary. There is a subtle truth here. You do not need more time off. You need a moment in which you are not being pulled into the past or the future, because only in that moment is the nervous system truly allowed to settle. Takeshi observed that most modern people do not know how to end a day. They carry unfinished tasks, unsaid words, and unrealized worries in their sleep, and so even with closed eyes, the body is never truly at rest. And when rest no longer works, it is not a sign that you need to try harder or change more, but a sign that it is time to look again at how you are present in the moments you call rest. Part num. Letting go is not giving up. For many people, the moment they hear the phrase letting go, a quiet anxiety arises because in their minds, letting go is the same as giving up, being weak, or abandoning responsibility, as if loosening their grip would cause their entire life to slip out of control. That fear is real, and it did not appear by accident. It was shaped over years of having to hold yourself together just to stay upright. But Takeshi understood letting go in a completely different way. He did not see it as stepping away from life, but as putting down unnecessary tension that you have grown used to carrying. Letting go, in his view, does not make you weaker. It simply returns you to a weight that a human being can actually carry, instead of forcing you to hold the future before it arrives. Most of us are not exhausted by what we do, but by the layers of pressure we place on top of our actions. You do not just work to complete tasks. You work to prove yourself, to avoid judgment, to keep from falling behind. These quiet motivations are what slowly erode your energy over time. Letting go does not mean stopping what you do. It means stopping the constant, unforgiving self-monitoring. It is the moment you allow yourself to do something without standing outside of yourself to grade it. It is allowing a thought to pass without immediately chasing it down to fix or resolve it. Takeshi once said that we have become so accustomed to living in a state of always needing to be right, productive, and in control that we have forgotten what it feels like to make a mistake without collapsing, to move slowly without being left behind, to be tired without blaming ourselves for it. Letting go is also the act of no longer optimizing every moment. You stop turning every pause into a recovery plan, every rest into a task to complete, every uncomfortable emotion into a problem that must be solved immediately. Some emotions do not need to be fixed. They only need to be allowed. What is subtle is that letting go does not come from forceful decisions. It arises from deep exhaustion. When you have been bracing yourself for too long, the body and mind begin to signal that this way of living is no longer sustainable. In that moment, letting go is not a choice. It is life attempting to rebalance itself. Many people fear that if they let go, everything will fall apart. But Takeshi's experience with his students revealed the opposite. When someone stops pulling their mind tight, they become clearer, less reactive, and more precise in their actions, not because they try harder, but because there is less interference. Letting go is also the moment you stop placing your entire life onto each single moment. You no longer demand that today answer for the future, or that a small decision define your worth as a human being. When that weight is set down, the present becomes light enough to live inside. There is a difficult truth here. Much of the pressure we carry does not come from the outside world, but from the harsh relationship we maintain with ourselves. At its deepest level, letting go is about softening that relationship, no longer treating yourself like a project that must be constantly repaired. Takeshi never told his students to let go as a command. He simply created the conditions for them to see how tightly they were holding on, and how much that grip was draining them. When that seeing became clear enough, letting go happened naturally without force. Letting go does not bring a sense of victory. It does not make you feel triumphant or proud. Instead, it offers something quieter. An inner space where you no longer need to stay on guard. A place where you can breathe without asking permission. And within that space, another state begins to emerge. Gentle, real, and requiring no effort to maintain. A state Takeshi called presence, not as a technique to return. Letting go is not the destination. It is only the door. And when that door opens, you do not step into a new life. You simply step back into the life you left long ago, when everything first began to feel too heavy. Part so presence. When energy returns, presence is not a skill you need to master, nor a special state you must achieve. It is simply the ordinary moment when you are nowhere else but where you are, not running ahead, not pulling backward, not trying to become a different version of yourself. Takeshi said that energy does not disappear, it only becomes scattered, and when you gather the parts of yourself that are spread across the past and the future, energy returns on its own, without effort or force. like water naturally flowing to the lowest point when nothing blocks it. Presence does not bring excitement, nor does it make you feel better or higher than others. It brings something quieter and harder to describe. The feeling of no longer being pulled, no longer bracing yourself, no longer needing to tense just to exist. When you are present, you do not do more, and you do not do less. You simply do one thing at a time, and it is this lack of division that makes action feel lighter, clearer, and more sustainable, even though nothing outwardly appears to change. Takeshi often reminded his students that the human body knows how to recover better than any method, as long as it is placed in the right conditions. And that condition is not long rest, but being fully alive in the moment that is happening. You can recognize presence most clearly in very small moments. When you drink water and truly feel its coolness, when you walk and notice your feet touching the ground, when you exhale without rushing to inhale again. These brief moments are enough for the nervous system to soften. Presence does not eliminate thought, but it changes your relationship with thought. Thoughts still arise, but you no longer have to follow every one of them or react as if they were commands, and that freedom alone returns a great deal of energy. Takeshi observed that the greatest warriors were not those who felt no fear, but those who could remain with their bodies even when fear appeared, not letting the mind rush ahead of danger, not letting emotion dictate action. In modern life, this means you can face pressure without being swallowed by it, work without losing yourself, rest without guilt, because you are no longer living in a state of constant inner division. When presence returns energy, it does not arrive as a sudden surge. It comes quietly and gradually, sometimes only noticeable after a few days when you realize you are no longer tired in the old way, no longer drained by small things, no longer bracing yourself just to get through the day. Takeshi said that presence does not make life easier, but it places you in the right position within your life, and when you are in the right place, many things adjust on their own without your interference. You may only be present for a few seconds before drifting away again, then returning once more, and that is completely natural, because presence is not a state to be held tightly, but a gentle return, repeated without blame. And in those repeated returns, energy slowly gathers, not so you can do more, but so you can live more deeply with less fragmentation and less of the exhaustion you once believed was inevitable. If there is one thing Takeshi wanted people to remember about presence, it is this: you do not need to become someone else. You only need to stop leaving your stave. Even for a moment, life will know what to do next. Part B. Exhaustion as a message. There is a very different way to look at exhaustion, not as an enemy to be eliminated, but as a subtle signal sent by the body and the mind, reminding you that have drifted too far from this moment without realizing it. We usually fight fatigue, push it away, try to override it, and rarely stop to listen to what it might be trying to say, because listening may require admitting that something in the way we are living has gone slightly off course. Takeshi said that prolonged exhaustion does not appear to punish you. It appears to protect you, because when you live in a state of constant background tension for too long, the body uses fatigue as a way to slow you down. Exhaustion often arrives when you have exceeded your capacity for presence, when the mind has traveled too far ahead, carrying too many things that do not belong to the present, and the body has to speak on your behalf. At times, fatigue is not asking you to rest more, but asking you to return to the body, to the breath, to the simple experience of being here. Because that is the only place where real recovery can begin. If you pay close attention, you may notice that the moments you feel most exhausted are not when you are doing the most, but when you are resisting what you feel, forcing yourself to be okay, to be strong, to continue, even though inside you are already depleted. Takeshi observed that modern people are very skilled at ignoring small signals, until the body has to speak louder and more clearly, and by then, exhaustion has become a familiar state rather than an early warning. Seeing exhaustion as a message does not mean giving up or surrendering to it. It means stopping the fight against it and beginning to treat it not as a defect to fix, but as information to understand. When you stop fighting exhaustion, you create space to listen, and within that space, you may realize that what you need is not more effort, but less distance from yourself. In Takeshi's view, exhaustion is not the opposite of strength. It is what remains of strength when it has been used in the wrong way. And when you learn to direct energy properly, exhaustion quietly withdraws. Perhaps the most important thing exhaustion is trying to remind you is simply this: you do not need to run faster. You only need to pause long enough to notice how long you have not been here. Part B, the final question. Returning. There comes a point in this journey when you no longer need more explanations, more concepts, or more examples, because everything has quite enough for a very simple question to appear. One that is not loud, not forceful, but impossible to avoid. That question is not how can I be less tired, nor how can I live better, but simply this: where am I right now? Takeshi said that every path of return begins with a question like this. Not one meant to be answered by logos, but one the body responds to with honest sensation. Are you here or are you living somewhere else in your mind? We are used to living without ever asking this question, because asking it means facing the truth that many moments of our lives have passed without our presence. Not because we didn't care, but because we became accustomed to being pulled away. Pulled by responsibility, by worry, by things to think, to calculate, to prepare for, until absence felt normal and presence began to feel rare, even luxurious. The question, where am I, does not demand immediate change. It does not ask you to fix or improve anything. It simply opens a very small gap where you can see the distance between your body and your mind. When you ask it sincerely, you may notice that your body is sitting here, but your mind is already in tomorrow, in a conversation that hasn't happened yet, in a fear without form. And that recognition alone is already the first step of returning. Takeshi did not see drifting as a failure. He said drifting is the nature of the mind, while returning is the practice of being human. What matters is not whether you drift, but whether you notice and come back. And that return requires no ritual, no long period of time, no special setting. It can happen in the instant you notice your breath, your hearing, your seeing, your sense of touch. Some people wait for a dramatic sign to change, a shock, a bold decision. But Takeshi believed that the most lasting changes always begin with things so small that no one else notices, except you. A breath that is fully felt, a step that is not rushed, a moment when you stop standing outside yourself, watching and judging. The question, where am I, also pulls you out of automatic living, where everything runs on momentum, where you react before you realize it, where days stack on top of each other without a true pause. When this question's asked often enough, not in words but in attention, you begin to see something clearly. Most of what exhausts you does not exist in the present moment, but in your absence from it. And when you are present, even briefly, even imperfectly, your inner system begins to adjust, as if it finally receives the signal that it no longer needs to stay on guard. Takeshi said that presence is not about adding something to life, but about leaving life less often. And this final question is the lightest thread that pulls you back. You will not always be able to answer it, and that is fine, because every time you forget and then remember to ask again, that is already a complete cycle of awareness. This question does not make you special, nor better than anyone else, but it does something far more important. It places you back in the correct position, not ahead of life, not behind it, but inside it. And when you stand inside your life instead of circling around it, many things naturally become simpler, not because life changes, but because you are no longer divided while living it. You may still feel tired, still worry, still struggle, but the difference is that you are no longer completely lost inside those states. You know where you are, and you know that you can return. Takeshi's final question is not a conclusion. It is a quiet invitation, offered to anyone who has wandered too far inside their own mind and wishes to come back. And that invitation is held in just one line right now. Where are you? Perhaps as you reach this point, nothing dramatic has happened inside you. No sudden realization. No surge of motivation to change everything tomorrow. And if that is the case, that is completely fine. Because this journey was never meant to make you better. It was meant to help you stay longer with yourself. Takeshi once said that people do not lose themselves in great disasters. They lose themselves in very ordinary days, when they live too fast, too far ahead, in too many places at once, until they forget what it feels like to be fully inside a single moment. Tomorrow, you may still wake up to the same work, the same worries, the same familiar pressures, but if there is one small difference, it is that you notice where you are when those things arise. Not to fix them, not to escape them, but to stop abandoning yourself while facing them. You do not need to live slower than others. You do not need to become less ambitious. And you do not need to step away from life. You only need to stop living in a state of constant absence. Because when you are not here, everything becomes heavier than it needs to be. A single conversation becomes tiring. A small decision feels exhausting. Even rest becomes heavy. But when you are here, even partially, even for a few seconds, even imperfectly, the difficult things no longer pull you so far away. Takeshi never promised that rest would erase suffering. He only said that suffering becomes bearable when you stop resisting it with your entire being. Perhaps you have grown used to being strong, used to enduring, used to moving forward without knowing why you feel so tired. But if you have listened all the way to this point, perhaps something in you is ready for a different way of living. Not louder, not more impressive in the eyes of others, just more honest. Honest means when you are tired, you know you are tired. Honest means when you are worried, you do not pretend you are fine. Honest means when you are here, you do not run away into your mind. Presence does not turn you into someone new. It simply returns you to you were before you learned to leave yourself in order to adapt, survive, or be accepted. If in the coming days you find yourself tired again, even though you have not done anything excessive, remember that you may not need more discipline, more motivation, or more effort. Perhaps you only need to pause for one breath and ask the oldest, truest question again. Right now, am I here? You do not need to answer it. Just ask, because the moment you ask, you have already returned one step, and this journey does not end here. It does not end with a video. It does not end with a conclusion. It continues in the smallest moments of your life. When you wash your hands, when you take a step, when you exhale without rushing to inhale again. If you stay with this channel, we will meet again in other questions, not to explain life, but to be with it more deeply. And if this is the only time you hear these words, that is also fine. Just remember this. You are not broken. You are not behind. You have simply traveled too far away from yourself, and exhaustion is how life calls you back. We will not promise to meet again in time. We promise to meet again in presence, somewhere in a very ordinary moment, when you pause and realize that you are still here,